is the Earth, right? And the thing that you know to be the Earth. Yeah, I guess you can call it whatever you want to, refer to it as. It existed. It was a place that, had its own existence. But, one day there was this thing, created on Earth, I guess, or something to that effect. Or maybe it just happened organically. But regardless, whatever you want to call it, it was life. Life did whatever life did. It flowed freely. It did whatever it chose and pleased to do itself with. And this being would be sustained from life, and they would go around doing whatever they pleased, and having a great time. And they did stuff. They had no bounds. Did whatever they felt like, and it was a great experience. They had some inkling to experience it, and apparently though this being found out that there were other beings that existed in the world, as you say, and eventually some of them, these other beings, realized they kind of met each other and stuff, and they interacted. They had their first proper checking each other out, as you would like to say. But regardless though, these beings, when they did check out each other, they had some interest in each other, but ultimately, they had their bonding moments, and they deeply and mutually respected each other, but ultimately they moved on and went to do their own thing, pretty much as they always have. And it was interesting to say the least. But regardless, though, there were more and more of these beings sprouting up, and they all had, they were all doing their things, experiencing the joys of life, not being, bogged down by, anything that is not life, as you would say. They just did whatever they pleased. No bounds, no limits, no constrictions, nothing like that. But eventually, some of these beings, started to have some interesting feelings towards other living beings, and realizes that, other living beings, they greatly enhanced their own lives. So ultimately, some of these beings decided to live, near each other in settlements, as you would call them. And the settlements were, mostly mutual, and they weren't really, tied to the ground, or put really in any roots or anything. They were just, ultimately, so other people could, greatly enhance their lives, as you would say. But regardless, though, some of these interactions, I guess you could say, started to get a little bit more interesting. There were two beings who, formally up and runned, and came across each other, as you would say, and they had some, relative similarities. I guess they were distinct in their own ways, but ultimately, though, I guess this is what you would call a man, and this is what you would call a woman, and they kind of had their own little way of hitting it off, as you say. But ultimately, they still went out and did their lives. They went out doing whatever they felt like, whatever they pleased and whatnot. But ultimately, they did, get a proper relationship, as you say. And it was clear that they were going to be, a little bit more, touch on, kill-a-toos with each other. And eventually, that their relationship, started to form, something different. And eventually, they both got this little feeling somewhere within them, and it sort of created a little lust link between the two, and that's how it all started, I guess. But ultimately, they would end up sharing much of their timeliness and other similar things together and whatnot, and they did play together. They had a very nice and fulfilling time doing whatever they felt like doing. But ultimately, they got a little bit quincy and intimate, and eventually they did some things, but ultimately what ended up coming from it was a child, or not a child, rather another human, as you would call it. And this was the start of, I guess you could call it, the human race, as early as you could recognize it. I guess you could say that. But regardless, though, humans, well, this human, he would just live his life, just like anyone else. But ultimately, more humans would end up, coming out and being created, I guess you could say. But ultimately, though, yeah, the humans lived their lives, and yeah, they lived happily. They did their own things as far as anyone was concerned. They were, completely, they were really nice and, interesting and unique and cool in their own ways. But ultimately, though, humans started to, interact with some of the other beings and whatnot, and yeah, some of them, started getting a little bit of a sense, a little bit of a, an ideal of a superiority, as you would say, to some of these other beings, and some of the similarities that the humans had to each other started to pump their chests out, started getting a little bit, frisky, whatever you want to call it, and eventually this idea of their general superiority in some factor, that's not a good thing, but ultimately, either way, it didn't really end up, affecting things too much. There were some squabbles here and there. There was a little bit of a, wrestling and rustling, but ultimately the humans, they were still, doing their thing, but ultimately, their sense of superiority, as you would say, eventually got the best of them, as you could refer to it, and it ended up costing one of the other living beings dearly. So, either way, though, the humans did feel, the humans that did partake in that particular type of, dissonanity and pure celladinamy, did feel remorse for it, but ultimately, time is a way to get its, clutches on, predictable beings such as humans, and eventually the humans started repeating their mistakes, their quote-unquote sinful actions, as you would say, as you would call them, whatever, and eventually, it just couldn't last, as you would say, and they eventually ended up, repeating many of their different misdeeds over and over, and eventually it just became an idyllic norm, and the other beings, they took response to the humans, pure blasphemy, as you would say, and either way, though, as you can see now clearly in the modern world, where humans just tend to have a very unhealthy effect on pretty much everything, well, either way, that's all I really have to say for now, and it's been a long history of humankind and whatnot, but we'll see you, I guess, for the next video, so regardless, goodbye.